The night was eerily quiet, with only the hum of the truck's engine breaking the silence as Mark drove down the deserted highway. The road stretched endlessly ahead, illuminated only by the dim glow of his headlights. It was the kind of route truckers hated, isolated, with no signs of life for miles. He had been on the road for hours, his eyelids heavy, when something in the distance caught his eye. Lying on the side of the road, barely visible under the flickering glow of a distant streetlight, was a black duffel bag. It was oddly placed, as if someone had thrown it out of a moving vehicle. At first, Mark ignored it. People dumped all kinds of junk on these roads. Old tires, broken furniture, even bags of trash. But as he passed, a strange instinct gnawed at him, telling him to stop. Against his better judgment, he pulled over, the truck's air brakes hissing loudly in the empty night. As he stepped out, the chill in the air sent a shiver down his spine. The bag looked heavier than normal, its fabric stretched tight. He nudged it with his boot, half expecting something to move inside. Nothing. Curiosity won over caution. He bent down and grabbed the handle, surprised by its weight. Whatever was inside was dense, too dense for clothes or trash. His pulse quickened. He glanced around, feeling exposed in the middle of nowhere. No cars, no lights. Just him in this abandoned bag. His mind raced with possibilities. Drugs? Stolen goods? Or just a forgotten gym bag? He had heard stories. Truckers stumbling upon things they shouldn't, getting caught in problems way bigger than themselves. He knew he should leave it alone. But something inside him whispered, "Open it." The moment his fingers unzipped the bag, a gust of wind howled through the empty road, as if the universe itself was warning him. And then, he saw it. Stacks of cash. Bundles upon bundles of crisp $100 bills packed tightly, almost too neatly. His breath hitched, his hands trembled. This wasn't just money. This was something dangerous. Mark's pulse pounded in his ears as he crouched beside the duffel bag, the weight of its discovery pressing down on him like a physical force. The wind howled softly across the deserted highway, carrying with it an eerie sense of stillness. A moment frozen in time, as if the universe itself was waiting to see what he would do next. His fingers hovered over the zipper, his breath shallow. His entire life had been spent scraping by, long hours, low wages, debts that never seemed to shrink. And now, right in front of him, was more money than he had ever seen in his life. Slowly, he slid the zipper open, the faint metallic sound echoing unnaturally loud in the empty night. Rows of neatly stacked bundles of cash stared back at him, pristine, untouched, like something out of a movie. The air inside the bag smelled faintly of rubber and ink, the unmistakable scent of fresh, untraceable money. His brain scrambled to process what he was looking at. How much was this? 100,000? $500,000? More? He picked up one of the stacks, his hands trembling as he flipped through the crisp bills. All hundreds. No bank bands, no markings. Whoever had left this bag behind hadn't pulled it out of a bank. This was under-the-table money, cartel money, blood money. His stomach twisted. He shouldn't be touching this. A sudden rush of paranoia gripped him. His head snapped up, scanning the empty road in both directions. Nothing but darkness. But something felt off. His skin prickled, the hair on the back of his neck standing on end. Was someone watching? He forced himself to breathe, to think logically. No one dumps this much cash by accident. Someone either left it for a pickup or, worse, they were coming back for it. His heart pounded in his chest. He needed to decide. Fast, walk away, pretend he never saw it. Get back in his truck and leave before the real owner returned. But could he really just turn his back on a life-changing fortune? Call the cops. Let them deal with it. But how would that go? They'd ask why he stopped. They'd investigate him. And if this money belonged to the kind of people he thought it did, they'd find out who called. Take it. Just load the bag into his truck and drive away. No one had to know. It was just sitting here waiting for someone to claim it. Why not him? A cold sweat slicked his palms. His breath felt tight in his chest. Then, in the distance, the faintest glimmer of headlights. His heart lurched. Someone was coming, and they were about to find him standing over a bag full of their money. Mark's mind raced as the distant headlights flickered against the pitch-black horizon. He had seconds, maybe less, to make a decision that could define the rest of his life. Every instinct screamed at him to drop the bag, get back in his truck, and drive away like none of this had ever happened. But something held him there. His eyes darted between the highway and the stacked bundles of $100 bills, still neatly packed inside the duffel. His hands tingled, sweat pooling at the base of his neck. This was too much money to walk away from. This wasn't some forgotten wallet on a gas station counter. This was life-changing. Then another thought punched through his greed like ice. Water. If he took the money, someone would come looking for it. His gut twisted violently. No one just loses this kind of cash. Whoever had left it here wasn't some clueless tourist. They were dangerous people. The kind that didn't forgive. His breathing quickened. The headlights were closer now. Too close. He grabbed the duffel, his fingers curling around the handles, feeling the weight of every single decision he had ever made in his life pressing down on him. Option 1, drop it and run. If he left the bag, whoever was coming might not even stop. They'd pick it up, drive away, and never know he was here. He could pretend this never happened and go back to his trucker's life. Long hours, low pay, endless highways stretching into nowhere. But deep down, he knew the truth. If he walked away, he'd spend the rest of his life wondering what he could have done with that money, wondering if it really could have been his ticket out. Option 2, call the cops. Maybe that was the safest bet. Report it. Let them deal with it. But then what? The police would ask too many questions. Questions Mark didn't have good answers for. And if this money was tied to criminals, real criminals, they'd know exactly who made the call. No, that wasn't an option. Option 3. Take it and go, the riskiest but also the most tempting. If he loaded the bag into his truck and left, he could disappear. No one had seen him stop. No one knew he was here. If he played it smart, he could make this work. A gust of wind whipped through the empty road, making the fabric of the duffel flutter slightly. The headlights were closing in fast. Whoever was coming would be here in seconds. Mark made his choice. He grabbed the bag, threw it into his truck, and slammed the door. As he sped off, his tires kicking up dust, his heart pounded with the realization of what he had just done. He had stolen a fortune, and now someone was going to come looking for him. The adrenaline in Mark's veins was like wildfire, setting every nerve in his body ablaze as he gripped the steering wheel. The duffel bag sat beside him in the passenger seat, heavy, ominous, a ticking time bomb disguised as a fortune. His truck roared down the highway, but no matter how fast he drove, he couldn't outrun the weight of what he had just done. He forced himself to check his mirrors. The headlights he had seen before had vanished. Maybe they had turned off, maybe they weren't even after him, or maybe they were playing a different game. His hands tightened on the wheel. He needed a plan. Fast. He couldn't just roll into the next truck stop with a bag full of illicit cash. If this money was criminal, it was marked. Someone, somewhere, knew where it was supposed to be. And soon, they'd realize it wasn't there. His first thought was to keep driving, cross state lines, put as much distance between himself and that stretch of highway as possible. But then what? Where could he hide a bag like this? Banks were out of the question. Depositing large amounts of cash would immediately raise red flags, and stuffing it under his bed like some amateur was just begging for trouble. He needed time to think. His phone buzzed. Unknown caller. His stomach dropped. No one called him this late, and no one should have known he was here. His thumb hovered over the decline button. Ignore it. Just keep driving. But something inside him itched. The fear of the unknown was worse than the fear of what he already knew. He swallowed hard and answered. Silence. Then, a voice. Low, steady, Too calm. You took something that doesn't belong to you. Mark's blood ran ice cold. His throat tightened as he tried to find words, but before he could respond, click. The line went dead. His chest heaved as he stared at his phone, fingers tightening around it until his knuckles turned white. They already knew. Mark's foot slammed on the gas, his truck tearing through the empty road as if speed could erase what had just happened. But deep down, he knew the truth. They weren't going to let him run. Somewhere, someone was already looking for him. Someone who had left that money there for a reason. Someone who wasn't going to ask politely for it back. Game had already started, and Mark was the hunted. Mark's heart pounded like a war drum in his chest. His hands were slick with sweat, gripping the steering wheel as if it were the only thing tethering him to reality. They knew. They knew he had taken the bag. And that meant only one thing. They were coming. The highway stretched endlessly ahead, a dark ribbon cutting through the empty landscape. His headlights carved a path through the night, but every flickering shadow, every pair of distant lights in the rearview mirror, sent a surge of fear through his body. Was that just another driver? Or was someone following him? He reached for his phone, the unknown caller still lingering in his call log like a silent threat. What do I do? Call the police? No, that was a trap. These people had connections. If they found him this fast, it meant they had eyes everywhere. If he went to the cops, he'd only be making himself an even bigger target. Then the headlights appeared again, this time closer. His stomach twisted. He flicked his eyes to the mirror. The car wasn't just driving in the same direction, it was matching his speed. Mark's breath hitched. They weren't guessing anymore. They had found him. He eased his foot onto the gas pedal, gradually increasing his speed. If they were following him, they'd either have to speed up or reveal themselves by backing off. They sped up. A lump formed in his throat. This wasn't a coincidence. He was being hunted. His mind scrambled for an exit strategy. The next turnoff was miles ahead. Nothing but open highway and empty road between him and whatever nightmare was closing in behind him. Running wasn't an option. He needed to think. Then, his headlights caught a road sign ahead. Rest stop. 2 miles of plan snapped into place. He had one chance. He took a deep breath and slammed on the brakes. The truck roared as the tires screeched against the pavement, his body lurching forward from the sudden force. Behind him, the other car reacted, too slow. It swerved, nearly. Losing control before regaining track, Mark didn't waste a second. He yanked the wheel and veered onto the exit ramp toward the rest stop. The car followed. His heart pounded as he pulled into the dimly lit parking lot. A few trucks were parked, their drivers asleep inside. The small convenience store was open, but empty. He killed the engine. Silence. Then, the car rolled in after him, its headlights bathing his truck in an eerie glow. They weren't hiding anymore. Mark's breath came in shallow gasps as the driver's door opened. A tall figure stepped out, dressed in black, calm, too calm. And then, he had made his choice. Now he had to survive it. Mark's breath came in short, ragged gasps as he sat frozen behind the wheel. The man in black didn't hesitate. His movements were deliberate, controlled. This wasn't some random thug. This was a professional. The gun gleamed under the harsh rest stop lights. The barrel aimed slightly downward. Not a direct threat, but a silent message. There's only one way this ends. Mark's pulse thundered in his ears. He had seconds to react. The man stepped closer, slow and methodical, like a predator that had already caught its prey. A voice cut through the silence, calm but edged with something cold. Step out of the truck. Mark's fingers twitched against the steering wheel. He swallowed hard, his throat dry as sandpaper. If he got out, was there a way out of this? He could see it now. He'd step out, they'd take the money, and then... What? Let him walk away? No. He wasn't stupid. People who found themselves in situations like this didn't get to walk away. His mind raced through possibilities. Fight, No chance. The man was armed, trained. Run? Useless. They'd chase him down before he got 10 feet. That left him with one option: a distraction. Slowly, his right hand inched toward the gear shift. Neutral, the man noticed. His head tilted slightly. I said. Mark slammed his foot onto the gas. The truck lurched forward, roaring to life. The sudden movement caught the man off guard. His finger twitched on the trigger. A gunshot cracked through the night, shattering the passenger side window. Mark ducked instinctively, glass exploding around him as he yanked the wheel, forcing the truck into a violent spin. The tires screeched, smoke rising as he fought to regain control. He barely had time to register what happened next. The man had jumped out of the way, but Mark saw something in the mirror. Another car, parked near the entrance. More of them. They weren't alone. This wasn't just a hit. It was a setup. They'd been waiting. And now, Mark wasn't running from one man. He was running from an entire operation. Mark's heartbeat pounded against his ribcage like a war drum, his mind barely able to keep up with his instincts as the truck lurched forward, skidding onto the open highway. The shattered passenger side window let in a howling gust of wind, the cold night air cutting through him like a blade. He wasn't escaping anymore. He was being hunted. His eyes darted to the mirror. The car was right behind him. Not just one, but two. They had backup. He had walked straight into a trap, and now they weren't letting him go. Mark's hands were slick on the wheel, his knuckles white as he pushed the truck to its limit. The massive vehicle rumbled beneath him, but he knew. They were faster. His mind raced. Think. He knew these roads better than they did. He had to use that. Up ahead, a narrow service road split from the highway, a steep, winding dirt path that cut through the hills. A death trap for anyone going too fast. Perfect. Without hesitation, he yanked the wheel, the truck jerking violently as it veered off the asphalt and onto the dirt road. The headlights behind him swerved. They weren't expecting that. The road was rough, the truck bouncing violently as he struggled to maintain control. But he was ahead now. A few more seconds, and he could disappear into the hills. Then, a second gunshot rang out. Tires exploded. Mark's world tilted sideways as the truck spun out of control, metal screeching against the rocky terrain. His body slammed against the door as the vehicle barreled into a ditch, crashing into a tangle of brush and dirt. Pain exploded through his shoulder. His head swam. For a moment, everything was silent. Then, footsteps. Through the fractured windshield. He saw them. 3 men now, silhouettes against the blinding headlights. One of them stepped forward. The same man from the rest stop, the one who had pulled the gun. He wasn't aiming anymore, he wasn't in a rush because he knew. Mark wasn't going anywhere. The man crouched down beside the wrecked truck, peering in through the broken glass. His voice was calm, controlled. You really thought you could just take it? Mark's breath was ragged. Blood dripped from a cut on his forehead. His fingers twitched, searching for anything, a weapon, an escape, a miracle. The man sighed, almost disappointed. You have no idea what that money was for, do you? Mark swallowed hard, his pulse hammering. It wasn't yours to find. The man straightened, reaching into his coat. Mark's vision blurred. The last thing he saw was the glint of metal under the pale moonlight. Then, darkness.